Nation of Fit in 10, welcome to day 54. 16 days to go. 16 days. Just over 2 weeks. And that's still 1/5 the challenge. And a lot can happen. Every day makes a difference. Do not lose sight of this. Every day makes a difference. As I mentioned in various videos, many videos, it's all about putting in the work every day, putting in more than not putting in, right? Stacking up those wins versus stacking up those losses, right? So the more that you do, to a certain extent, the better you're going to be, right? So all is not lost if mistakes are made. All is not lost if you sabotage yourself. All is not lost if you've made many errors, right? You can still make progress, right? Remember that one saying I had? Well, maybe I'll bring it up at the end of this, video. Let's get into more of the feedback here. So I'm just going to reread this question from yesterday because it was a great question. Taking it one day at a time, eating meals, not eating between meals, waiting to eat until I get home, being mindful of my mood, and how it can trigger emotional and unnecessary eating or eating out. Continue to observe and reevaluate my choices with comfort foods that cause trouble for me. Alcohol, brackets, getting better. Fast food, getting worse, in brackets. Pizza, frozen pizza, Sun Chips, Hawkins Cheesies, Crispers, ice cream, mac and cheese, chocolate, Halloween candy, peanut butter M&Ms, and bubble tea. Yeah, well, it's quite a list. And these are very damaging foods. You know, beyond just damaging, these foods are just not, a lot of these are not, there's not a lot of nutrition in this, right? There's a lot of calories, but there's not a lot of nutrition. So yeah, we got to be mindful. And, just coming back to yesterday, we really should try to understand more our why in, why we do what we do, and better take control of this and understand the ramifications rather than just going, lizard brain and just reacting to perhaps the way that we feel and then trying to fill the void through whatever means, whether it is food or other unhealthy habits, perhaps. I know it's not, I have no idea how hard it is for people. That, knowing how hard something is for somebody is, I think we always relate it to ourselves, but I don't think that's really necessarily fair. So I don't know how hard a given situation or, how hard it is breaking a habit, or how addictive perhaps these foods, or maybe a particular food, is for somebody. That is really hard to gauge, and I don't think there is really any way of gauging it. But one thing's for sure is that we do have control, all right? And that is something that you need to repeat to yourself, I think, and that you have control to make the right choices. And it is important for your long-term health, right? From your long-term freedom from disease. Okay, body composition is great. Obviously, we care about what we look like. How we feel is really important. This is all going to play into that. I think probably our health is probably the most important thing, right? Because without our health, as I mentioned before, I think it's just obvious. Without our health, we don't really have anything. So, try to hone in and figure out what is it exactly that is triggering you to make these choices, and also understand, this is one thing I say to myself, and I don't know if I mentioned this before or not, because I know I've mentioned it in challenges before. I don't know if I've mentioned this challenge. But, if I eat something, I really want something, I know I'm going to eat it. And then what? And then what? Because I'm going to eat, I can eat, for example, well, I guess an ISO bar is not the best example, although I do find them somewhat addictive. But you could eat, I don't know, let's say, what's something else I personally enjoy? I really like, and I haven't had one for probably since I was a kid, to be honest with you. I really used to like those Costco muffins, especially the chocolate chip ones, which is basically like cake with chocolate chips. And I could eat one of those in, I don't know, matter of like 2 minutes, maybe even less. And then what? And then you have to deal with the consequences, right? You have to deal with the consequences. So, one thing's for sure, when you're hungry, well, don't let yourself get overly hungry, for one. So I don't suggest going long periods of time without eating. Although that is one strategy, by the way, right? There is this, I think it's called the OMAD diet, right? 1 meal a day, I think it is, stands for. There is these different fasting protocols. I don't think these are good if you are really trying to overcome your food addictions. All right, I think the better strategy in this case is to, eat fairly frequently, eat those highly satiating foods, your proteins, your fibers, your fats. Those are going to be the most satiating foods. And then looking for the voluminous types of carbohydrates, or satiating carbohydrates. There are carbohydrates that are more satiating. Potatoes are actually a very satiating carbohydrate, by the way. And then trying to go for these foods before we, self-sabotage with things like this, right? But ultimately, it's about creating those habits, right? And trying to be as mentally strong as you can. Trying to set up a framework, trying to set yourself with some boundaries. Repeating to yourself that this is not going to be good for me. And I've got to, make some choices. I got to make some better choices for myself, especially as we age. Name something specific you need help with. Habits for better recovery. Despite prioritizing good sleep, 8 to 8.5 hours, I can feel really depleted after some workouts. I'm finding it really tempting to take extra recovery days, which can spiral and put me way off course. 8 or 8.5 hours sleep should be enough. Some people might need a little bit more than this. Again, put everything down on paper. Put your sleep down on paper that you're getting per night. Put your workouts, put your food down, put everything on paper. It makes it a lot easier to see what is reasonable. And of course, with 3 cardio sessions per week, like in the challenge, and 3 1-hour workouts per week, that's 4.5 hours per week. That is less than 3% of the time that you have for the total week. Now, I know that you're saying you're feeling depleted here. So perhaps if you're feeling depleted from 4.5 hours of exercise, although if I'm not mistaken with you, you are doing, you're training for a marathon, so that may have something to do with it. You may need to back off the amount of physical activity that you're doing. Okay, but unless you've done an extreme amount of exercise day in, day out, you shouldn't require a number of days off in a row. Okay, so there could be something else going on here. Maybe you're not having enough iron, or maybe you're not having enough certain B vitamins or B complex. Maybe there's something else that's leading you to feel like you don't have that energy. Maybe you want to be more specific in terms of what you mean by exactly depleted. Okay, maybe you're not getting enough sodium. Okay, especially if you're doing a lot of cardiovascular work where you're excreting sodium. This is going to make you feel very depleted. Okay, maybe we need to increase your carbohydrates, especially again if you're doing a lot of cardiovascular work. Anyway, something we should probably sit down and talk about one-on-one, or maybe you want to write me more. All right, anything you'd like me to cover in this week's video series? Thoughts on races, triathlons, duathlons, marathons. After completing my first duathlon bike run, I was useless for the rest of the day. I am grateful for the experience and really enjoy the thrill of the race, but despite my legs feeling strong, yay for weight training, my knees were shot, especially going downstairs. And my head was pounding, and I napped and watched TV until bedtime. Okay, so so a couple things here. This is probably something we should have talked about, because there's some strategies, especially in terms of hydration and food intake, that you want to follow before a race that will really make a big difference for your race. But if you're doing, I don't know how long this, or I don't know what a standard duathlon is in terms of distance. It'd be interesting to know just actually the total time that it took you to do the duathlon. It's normal to feel like super tired after that. This is a fairly extreme event, right? So, and I'm sure you're probably doing this for at least, I would say probably at least 3 hours, 4 hours. I don't know how long this is. So that's normal. In terms of, what you can do, feeling, having headache and feeling really, really depleted and stuff like this. Again, pre-strategy in terms of nutrition will make a big difference, like a huge difference. And then, that short period, that perio period during your race can make a difference, and of course post training. But you're gonna need some rest after this. Yeah, in terms of knees, there is specifically stuff you can do to help strengthen your knees. Well, it's really about training the musculature around the knees. But if you're running downstairs, it's definitely just gonna be hard on the knees, right? There's a lot of impact going on there. Okay, I'm at 11 and a half minutes. I'm going to come back to this question tomorrow, and there's another question that's added to this, so we'll get into that. Speak a little bit more on the duathlon. Maybe I'll look it up too, because I'm just curious, or maybe you want to write me and let me know how long it was. I'm sure there's probably a standard to this. Message of the day on this day 54. 16 days to go. Some of you I haven't heard from, especially those of you who I reached out to for your third scan and I have not heard back. You must tell yourself, no matter how hard it is or how hard it gets, I'm going to continue and I'm going to make it. You must tell yourself, no matter how hard it is or how hard it gets, I'm going to continue and I'm going to make it. All right? Give yourself some breaks if you need it. Okay? Give yourself perhaps even an off meal if you really, really need it, especially for that mental break. But as I mentioned in the beginning of this video and other videos, it's all about putting in more that's going to help you versus doing the things that are going to perhaps take you back, right? It is all, at the end of the day, mindset, right? It's all mental. This thing is 100% mental. Positive energy, positive vibes, believe in yourself. For the love of God, give some gratitude, and I'll talk to you all tomorrow. See you guys.